Hi, it's Queen Shay.
Hi, it's Mama FeFe.
Thank you for joining us for the second episode of the Unpacking My Past talk show. Today's topic is Daddy's Little Girl and my abandonment issues. Our subtopic for today is how lack of communication triggers me. But first, let us introduce ourselves. I am Queen Shay, filmmaker, creative being, and sickle cell advocate. Mama Fifi, I'm going to ask you a few questions so that you can introduce yourself to the people.
All right, great.
Let's start with who are you?
Okay, great. I am a certified sex coach from Sex Coach University. I am also an associate of marriage and family therapy and currently working on my dissertation at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. I am a mother. I'm an adult son who has the trait, and I am also a sickle cell disease advocate as well because I have SS.
Okay, so what? Why are you doing this show?
Well, I'm doing this show, first of all, because I do consider myself to be a servant and a healer of my community. I talk to people by coaching and assisted them in their own discovery of who they are and how they should actually exist in this world.
All right, great. And before we get started, I just want to say I'm in no way intentionally trying to hurt anyone or assassinate anyone's character. I'm simply telling my own truth on my path to healing and peace.
And I would like to add to that, I'm hoping that we, together doing this talk show, we can expand others, in their unpacking their suitcase and replace the content with positive, beneficial tips that everyone, you and other people, can carry out.
Awesome. Okay, great. So, again, our topic for this week is Daddy's Girl and my abandonment issues. So, I'm just going to dive right on into it.
Okay.
They say that your father is the first man that you fall in love with. And I definitely believe that to be true. And in some instances, he will be the first man to break your heart, unfortunately. And that definitely happened to me. My dad was definitely the first man to break my heart. Not in the sense of while he was here, but in him passing away, being killed and not being able to see him. It broke my heart. He passed away 3 years after my mom. Speaking of my mom, going back to last week's episode where we discussed my mother and her abusive relationship that she was in, I just want to let everyone know that my dad was not the man I was referring to. He was not the monster that I was referring to. I am definitely grateful that I had a good relationship with my dad, and I've never saw him act out of character. He was always respectful. He was always present, and he never, from my acknowledgement, never ever rose his hand to my mom. So that is something that I definitely wanted to clear the air about because there was a little bit of confusion.
Yeah.
So I
could be confusing. People could think you were talking about your father as the monster, but it's good to clarify that.
Yeah, he was definitely not it. My mother and father were not together. It was a different relationship she was in, a different person that she was engaged to. It was not my dad. I repeat, it was not my dad. So I just wanted to say that before we dive into this topic. So we're just going to go straight for it and dive straight in there.
Good.
My father's death definitely did put me in a place of feeling abandoned. It made me feel as if that everyone who truly loved and cared about me was temporary, that it was not a permanent part of my life, and that anybody who entered my life and promised to stick around were lying, honestly. And it did ultimately cause a lot of issues with the way that I dealt with people, the way that I handled relationships, how I maintained relationships, how quick I was to leave a relationship, whether it was
right, I'm out of here, gone.
Right, friendship, relationship. It was like, nope. As soon as something happens, that was my reason to just kind of say, okay, I don't want to be hurt anyway, so I'm just going to leave.
Right.
I know it wasn't fair to most people, but that was where I was at in my life, and I wasn't ready to accept that part of me for a very long time. But I did. Ultimately, it did change the way that I dealt with people, because I did recognize it. But ultimately, I think the difference between my mom's death and my dad's death is that, and I said this last week, I was not able to mourn my mom's death, which then turned into anger.
Right.
But with my dad, I was able to mourn his death. I was especially angry, but it was more so the fact that I felt abandoned more than I didn't feel that I can properly mourn his death, which I think, I would give credit to my dad's brother, Terry, my Uncle Terry. We definitely grew closer after my dad's passing. He was a father figure. He was someone who I could talk to, who listened, who understood, that I needed to say the things that didn't necessarily feel comfortable for him, just, because I know he was mourning his brother's death, but he wanted me to be able to heal. So he gave me that opportunity by actually listening and encouraging me to get it all out and to talk about it.
And that's something you didn't have for your mom?
Not really. I mean, to an extent, but I just felt like everybody was so shattered after my mom died. Like, everybody was definitely, even my dad, everybody was definitely like very fragile. And I felt like I was the only one who could be strong. I took that position.
I get, so that's why you said that you wasn't able to mourn your mom, because you felt like you had to be strong.
Yeah, I definitely felt I had to be strong, and I had to show everybody, look, if I'm not crying, and if I'm not feeling like I, need to talk about it, then we all should be good. I'm her daughter, But I guess it didn't really work that way. I tried to lead by example, but in truth, I really wasn't, because I just, like I said before, I let it turn into anger, and I was angry. But I felt like with my dad, I didn't have to be angry. I was mad at home. I was mad at school. I was mad when I went outside to play with my friends. But the only time I felt happy and peaceful was when I was with my dad, and I didn't have to feel that anger or aggression, And after a while, he encouraged me to talk about it, and I did to an extent, but I don't think that I fully, engaged the way that maybe I needed to, because I just didn't want to, I realized how he reacted and how her death affected him. So I didn't want, I didn't want to bring anything up for him, even though he was encouraging me and he was trying to talk to me. And I talked to him. It just wasn't, it was a little shallow. It wasn't too deep.
Right, because it sounds like, what you're describing is, you manifest your grief different ways. People grieve differently, right? And it's like you never know how it's going to come out. With your mom, you felt like you had to be strong, but you still was grieving,
Yeah.
you know. With your dad, you felt like you can express it a little more, maybe with your tears and everything. But you um, you expressed it.
Yeah, definitely. I was able to talk about the things that, were I felt more comfortable talking about with my uncle because I don't know, like guys, they have this whole macho mentality. So I just felt like, he could handle it better at that time. And maybe he could because I don't think, whatever I did tell him was bothering me. It never, re represented itself anywhere else in his life. He was just the type of person, he just let things go. He wanted to move forward. So it gave me that opportunity to do that as well. So,
That
yeah.
was. Mm-hmm.
um, I can also say, my father, his passing, it really did affect me in a way, with the lack of communication being a trigger for me. It affected me because, my dad had the tendency to not show up when he said he would. It didn't happen a lot. It didn't. But it happened enough to bother me. So,
It made an impact.
yeah, and I did. Before he passed away, I told him, communicating with me would be better than leaving me hanging. And the last time that actually happened was the night that he died. He was supposed to pick me up so I could spend the night, and he was supposed to go to church, take us to church the next day so that I can play the drums for him. And it was this big thing, and I was excited, and I just felt like I was angry because that night he never showed up. So I'm angry at him, like, what's going on?
Right, and you're full of this anxiety, like, where is he? What happened?
Yeah, bags packed,
Yeah.
everything, And then to
Right.
find out the next morning while I'm getting ready for church that, someone shot him, it really, it,
Wow.
it really, it hurt.
Devastating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was definitely devastated. If I can use a word, that would be it. I was devastated. And,
I can't imagine.
yeah, it definitely, it rocked me to my core. And I had great people around me that encouraged me. My church family definitely were there for me during that time. So I did have a little bit more people there praying and being that person that listened just to listen, just because, I needed to speak. And I really appreciated that, you know. But it was definitely hard. But I can also say my dad showed up more often than not, And
So, how do you think your experiences, with your father and the communication situation that you experienced with him, how do you think it impacted your life as an adult?
um, as an adult, I I have a few reasons, a few ways it has, the fact that my dad definitely had two different lives. So with me, he was, this kind, patient, compassionate, smart, very intelligent man. Respectful, father who definitely knew he was making an impact, and he was very purposed in doing that, being in my life. But he also separated me from the lifestyle that he was living. He was affiliated with one of the most notorious gangs out of LA. And it definitely, it caused me to be very, how can I put this? Like, even with the men that I dated before, like I said, I used to date bad boys, right? But they were never bad to me. And in ways, it reminded me of my dad, because they wouldn't necessarily take me into, danger or put me in situations I probably would never even meet most of the people they hung around. And it was mostly because they had that separation. They had the life that they wanted to have with me, and then the life that they had already been living before I came. And that was, ultimately, I feel that's how my dad was. He had the life he was living before I came. He was, you know what I mean? He was part of that culture, part of that lifestyle before I was even born, before I was even thought of, So it was, I'm pretty sure it wasn't easy to just be like, all right, I'm out, So it just showed me that there could be two sides to a person. And I think going back to last week's, episode, when I said, the good guys turn out bad, and then the bad boys, what you're getting right away.
Right up front.
And, honestly, it's the honesty of it. Even though my dad, he kept it separate, he never lied about it. He never hid it to the point where I didn't know who he was as a person. So, that's something I can say how it affected me.
So how you lost faith, with the people that you truly love?
Well, the woman I am today, it caused me to realize I cannot accept not communicating, even if there is no explanation, even if it's like, oh, I can't make it, and then end call. Like, I'd rather have that than actually be in the situation where I'm wondering what's going on, if you're okay. Breaking your word with me, it kind of takes me back to my dad and what I went through with him, especially, when he was killed.
So it creates a level of anxiety inside of you. Like,
yes.
When you make plans with your partner and, at a certain time you are supposed to be somewhere and they're supposed to come pick you up, and then you don't hear from them. It creates this anxiety because you have had a traumatic experience, which was your father, right?
Yes.
And that traumatic experience was he couldn't call you because someone had shot him. And so it makes you fearful when people do that to you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what would you do? How would you respond to your mate in those kinds of situations? What would be the things that would happen to you? What would you be feeling?
So one or two things would happen after. So I would be feeling it. It would then ultimately turn into anger. Because even if it was hurt, it turned into anger because then I'm mad because I'm hurt, right? So what would happen is I would either cut that person off, not speak to them at all.
You give them the silent treatment.
Yes, completely silent. Or I would definitely let them know was what I was angry about. And for a big portion of the conversation, I know they felt like, dang, I'm sorry, but dang, is it really that serious? Because they didn't know the trauma behind that trigger,
Right.
So,
Did it warrant all of that? Like, they're like, man, wow, I didn't mean it like that. But remember last week when we were talking about covert belief? So in those situations, like when you say I was hurt, what else was you thinking about yourself? How did that behavior make you feel about yourself?
that people were a temporary fixture in my life, that everyone who would love me would leave me. So what is the purpose in even trying to keep
What
them
about
around?
what about being important? Did you feel important? Did it make you feel important?
I mean, I still felt important. Uh, in a way, I did feel forgotten or
Like for
not
mhm.
taken seriously. You know,
Right.
so that
Right.
that is what happened after the
Yeah,
fact.
so you feeling like you're not being taken seriously, like I would consider that like not really important to that person, because how could you forget about calling me or being considerate enough to tell me if something changed, because you got me here waiting, right? So you all triggered, right?
Yeah.
With all this anxiety and everything, and with those covert beliefs, because if that's what you believe in about yourself, that's what you're manifesting, but you're not saying it. You're
Mm-hmm.
manifesting what that thing, the not calling, the not following up or following through, is making you feel like, right? You're not
Right.
saying that. So then the shutting down, the silent treatment, or even being hurt and angry are the behaviors that comes out as a result of it. So you're not really saying what you truly want. You're just complaining about what happens. And so did anything really get resolved for you in that nature? Like when things like that went on?
I mean, in a way, I'm the type of person, I don't like when I get over something, I'm over it, and it's best to just leave it alone, um, and let me calm down than to
Mm-hmm.
continue to poke at me and prod and try to figure me out, because then I'll just shut down more. So the the easiest ways for me to communicate better with a person is if I calm down, more effectively, should I say, is if I calm down. And for the most part, in most of my past relationships, we had that leveling of Shay's anger and going back and actually talking. And honestly, I had to search in something, do some soul searching myself,
Mm-hmm.
and really understand that I needed to overcome my abandonment issues, if only just to acknowledge them and start to work on them. So I definitely had to look back and figure out some things. Um, and it did. It took me a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But I realized that I couldn't keep living my life that way. And it's the memories that I create with other people that counts. It's
Mm-hmm.
creating memories and feeling that love, rather than being afraid to truly be in the moment and enjoy,
Mm-hmm.
love and enjoy that person and enjoy that moment we're creating that we will never forget. That I started to really truly
Had
miss.
you
So
Yeah, so I was going to ask, had you really experienced that? Because I understand that in unpacking your past, you really want to look forward to how you can have great relationships, right? Like if you were to get into another relationship, how you would want to be
Mm-hmm.
present. And like you said, overcoming your abandonment issues. Do you feel like you have enough tools and enough understanding to really manifest that? Like understanding your triggers, that, and then knowing that you have abandonment issues. Like, do you really feel comfortable, like if you were to get triggered in a relationship, what to do? Because we need to tell our listeners, like, what are the things that they can do when they are feeling triggered,
Mm-hmm.
when they are feeling abandoned?
Right.
Because it's like it's okay to understand it in our minds, right? It's okay to understand it, and we feel it in our hearts that we understand ourselves. But it's a whole different thing when it comes to presenting that or showing ourselves to our mates who we are and how we can truly communicate to be more effective, to be connected instead of disconnected. So you want to always think about, in terms of your traumas, your triggers, your abandonment issue, whatever you want to call it. It's like, through this discomfort, as we brought up before, how can I stay connected, and so that I can get the desired outcome that I would really like to have in this moment. So do you feel like you have enough under your belt, or is there something else that you would like to ask of me to help you with?
Yeah, I definitely feel like I can get better. I feel like no one's ever done growing, So I think that where I have gotten myself in this amount of time is great, but I definitely feel like there could be more tools that I pick up, like, why, what are some tools, that you would give someone that's struggling with abandonment issues? How can they use it to overcome their problems?
Well, I would say, first of all, it's in, like you say, it's in the recognition. If we can first admit and be honest to ourselves that we have these kind of issues,
Yes.
That's the first thing across the board, is to admit it and to be honest with ourselves. The second step is to be able to find your voice, whether you are able to communicate verbally. You should be able to communicate maybe through a letter sometimes, or just journal sometimes. Like, get it out. Just get it out first. Like, how you're feeling, how you were triggered, how it has angered you and upset. Just get it out, and then get out the resolution. Get out what it is that you truly desired. Because most often what we do is we keep telling the story. We keep telling the complaint. Well, I was abandoned, and how these kind of things make me feel, and if you continue to do this, how it's going to upset me. No, stop telling the story, right? Because we know that. Because if you're honest with your mate, he knows or she knows, and they understand that, right? So the work you have to do is now say, okay, I understand my story, but to gain a more profitable, a more pleasant life in communicating with my spouse, what am I, or my significant other, what are the things that I could do and say? And how can I behave to get the outcome that I desire? Now, that could be very scary. Why? Because we don't realize that the moment, like when you were younger, all excited, waiting for your dad, you guys were going to have a wonderful time. All of that, at that moment when you found out that he was shot and he was killed, right then and there, that trauma, it stunts us. It stunts us in our growth. right? It keeps us there. So every time we get triggered, we are then that 8-year-old, 7-year-old, 13-year-old, 16-year-old, whoever we were at that time when the trauma took place. So we are immature in certain areas in our adult lives. So therefore, it doesn't give us the ability to know how to do the things necessary that we need to do to get the outcome that we desire, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes when we complain about our significant others or our spouses, and we feel like we're not receiving what we need from them, sometimes it's because they don't know how, and it's like when you're in your relationships and someone is really trying to be there for you, but because you already feel like you're going to be abandoned, right? Mm-hmm. You try to get out of it or sabotage it before it's over. And so that's your default, and you miss out on what this person is really doing, how they really are there for you. Mm-hmm. So then you don't know how to receive what you say you desire because you never really experienced it. So in order to trust yourself and receiving the things that you desire, you got to believe that you can have it. You got to believe and know that you are worth it, right? Absolutely. And so you got to come out of the story. You got to come out of the trigger, and you got to just say what it is that you would like. Mm-hmm. So therefore, like if someone did miss an appointment with you, you can simply say to them, I would really appreciate it if you could just give me a text or a call to let me know that your plans was going to change, because I was waiting on you. We had these plans, and if it was an emergency or anything like that, I can understand, but if you would just communicate with me, then I will be okay, Mm-hmm. And so it also take another mature person to know that. Some people just know that and automatically do it. Some people just think, no, I'm grown, I can do whatever I want. And I think that kind of negative behavior is because they are dealing with some unresolved issues themselves, mm-hmm. right? That does not allow them to be more considerate of other people feeling. Mm. So there again is still attached to how you feel about yourself and how your mate feel about yourself, because that's the only way you're going to have good relationships, if both parties feel good about themselves, mm-hmm. and they know who they are, right? And you know who you are, they know who they are, and then you can communicate from a higher level and don't always feel like somebody is pointing a finger or blaming just because you made a simple request. Yeah. Because that's what it is. It's just a simple request. But sometimes when we have these blinders on, right, and we're triggered, the simple request becomes something else. The simple request could be, oh, why you sweating me, right? Some people say, oh, why you nagging me? Mm-hmm. Or, why do I have to do that? I'm not your child. And it gets to be something else other than a simple, honest request telling the person how to treat you, mm-hmm. how to respect you, right? Yeah. And then they have the same right to tell you how to treat them and how to respect them, mm-hmm. And then that's how we won't get into feeling abandoned. That's how we won't get into these negative aspects of our life that we feel like we have experienced, and this is what life taught us. And so as a result of these bad negative experiences, then this is the way I have to be, which is negative. And it's like negative, 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 just all down the line, never allowing yourself to see the beauty of what you can have in a relationship by just simply putting that stuff down and giving yourself permission to just simply request the desires that you want and how you want to be in your relationship. We all can give ourselves permission to have the relationships that we want. Absolutely. If we trust ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We got to trust ourselves despite all these things that have happened to us over our lifetime.
I definitely agree with you there. And that's where it starts, acknowledgement and trusting yourself to not only want better, but to do better. So, I definitely...
Yeah. Most definitely, and that's the work, and it's more than the notion, because, sometimes, like with some of my clients that I see, and especially couples, they have disagreement and they want to know, well, why my husband or why my wife, don't do this, that, and the other. And as I listen to the story and they start talking about their childhood and things that happen, that's where it began to unfold. Like, okay, I get it. The reason why the wife or the husband can't do X, Y, Z is because they never learned how to. So the behavior, the unbecoming behavior that you're getting, whether it looks like they're ignoring you, where it looks like that what you have to talk about is not important, if they isolate themselves or get quiet or leave the room and don't want to talk about, those are all the behaviors that they learned when they were younger. Mm-hmm. It's just manifesting in an adult now. If you got yourself in a temper tantrum over something that you didn't like as a child and you never resolved that as an adult, guess what you're going to have? You're going to have temper tantrums. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to know how to effectively communicate. You're just going to throw a temper tantrum. But now you're an adult and it doesn't look good. It's very scary. You can hurt somebody because you're an adult. Mm-hmm. As a child, that was a coping mechanism and it protected you and it might have gotten you what you wanted. But as an adult, we are supposed to be able to use our words and communicate and be vulnerable enough with one another to express ourselves so that the other person can really understand what we need to feel love in the relationship, to feel like we are supported. I won't say love because love is always there. You wouldn't be with the person if you didn't love them. But to be supported and to feel like you are in a good relationship that is workable for you, you have to be able to use your words and communicate and then do the action.
Absolutely.
Then do it.
So, how does a person recognize the trauma that has turned into a trigger? How would they go about recognizing it?
I'm sorry, that wasn't clear. I didn't hear that.
Oh, I said, how do you recognize the trauma that has turned into a trigger? It wasn't
clear.
Oh, I said, how do you recognize the trauma that has turned into a trigger? Like, how do you pinpoint it? I know for myself it was a little easier, but I know for other people they may struggle with even recognizing, why does this make me so angry? Why does this set me off? How would that person go about, recognizing that?
Well, first of all, if they ever are feeling like they are the victim, they could be triggered. They could be in their triggered mode. right? Where they feel like their back's against the wall and that they have all this anxiety in their bodies. You know, sometimes we get pain in our stomach, pain in our chest, our heart palpitate, we get shortness of breath. You know, our bodies talk to us, right? We can feel it in our bodies, right? And so when someone says something or do something and you feel it in your body, like it might pierce your heart in a way, that right then and there could be the trigger, like, and you have to think about, why did that affect me that way? Why did I feel hurt as a result of it? And sometimes when we unpack it, we'll see, well, that made me feel like I wasn't respected, or that made me feel like when I was, 3 years old and I was abandoned, then the stories start coming together, like, oh, that thing that they just did, it just pierced me, just like when I had this other experience. So that's a trigger. When you can think and you feel like, oh no, like you said before, Shay Brian, Queen Shay, you said, let me leave before they leave me. Right. See, that's a trigger. When you're feeling in that moment that, I got to get out of here because I don't see no way that we gonna straighten this out, or this can be straightened out, I'm gonna just break up with him before he breaks up with me. Why? Because you feel like you're in more control if you do the breaking up than if the man did the breaking up. You feel like if he did it, then you will feel more of that abandonment and you'll feel more hurt and sad as a result of it. So you think if you break up, you are controlling that you're gonna minimize the damage. And we really don't. What we are doing is that we are really damaging the relationship when we do those kinds of things. And it becomes hurtful anyway, because you not only hurt them, but you still hurt. You're not in control of that. You still hurt because you probably really didn't want to break up with them, but you just didn't. This is what I'm talking about. We just don't have the tools to know how to stick it out, to know how to correct it and go in to the space that we need to go in, which is to be very intimate and with each other, to be able to express how we feel so that we can give each other permission to have that kind of relationship. Not the triggered relationship, but to say, okay, I feel this, but what is it that I really want out of it, and how can I work towards to get it? But see, we are so engulfed in the trigger that we just reactionary. And that's another way we can understand that we are in triggered mode, is that we become reactionary. We just react. You pounce. Somebody say something, you just pounce. Right. Somebody do something, you just pounce. See, that's how you know you are not at one-ment with yourself. When you're not centered with yourself, you all over the place. You're pouncing. You got something to say over here, and you got something to say, and it's always negative. It's never positive. If you find yourself always commenting negatively, you need to check that out, because you need to ask yourself, why did I come up with that thought first? Why was that the first thought that I had? Is that the kind of person I am? Am I always thinking this kind of way? And if I am, why do I think that kind of way? Right? And then what do that kind of thinking gets me? It seemed like it really doesn't get me the outcome I desire. I really push people away. And then you make up these stories like, well, I'd rather be by myself anyway. No, we don't. We was not created to be by ourselves. No. It could become a choice after a while if that's what you want. We all have a choice. We all have this choice. you know. But yeah, that's how you can tell that you're triggered. You feel it in your body, you behaving negatively, you're reacting instead of being proactive, so you're not centered, you're not at peace, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things that let you know that you are in trigger mode.
Okay, and how is it, how do you communicate your triggers to people close to you so that they understand what it is that you're working through?
Okay, well, first of all, you have to be sensitive not only to yourself, but to the other person too. You have to do self care.
Hmm.
You have to be able to take care of yourself in a way that when there are triggers, you have a reserve that will allow you to be able to dig in and have the conversation. Because if you don't take care of yourself, it will always keep you in this heightened alert, and you will never have a reserve to even have a conversation with someone to clear it up. So the best way is first is to take care of yourself and the trigger. So say for instance, you and your mate, for whatever reason, just had a discussion and you got triggered. Right then in that moment, you can say, okay, I just got triggered. Just give me a moment, right? And we can deal with this later. If they can't do that, you can just go to, I'm going to just listen. I'm going to just calm myself down and listen. Let me just try to see if I can understand what they're saying, because I know I'm triggered. I'm going to put the trigger mode away and I'm going to bring myself present to truly understand. And you can just simply ask them, can you repeat what you said? Or when you said this, did you mean it that way? Because you want to make sure if they didn't mean it the way that it triggered you.
Mm.
So you want to ask the question, did you mean it this way? Because this is the way I understand it. And then they can say no, and they can clear it up. And then you can be like, huh, and you can breathe and you can put away the trigger. See, sometimes we just hear it, get triggered, and we just go off.
Yeah. Definitely.
And we just totally misunderstand, right? And so you can, if you're trying to change that behavior and you don't want to go off and you don't want to snap and you want to truly understand what it is you just saw or heard or whatever, you can just simply say, well, when you did this, did you mean to do it that way? And then if they do say yes, and then you can simply say, well, you do realize when you did it that way, it made me feel like this. Now, you're not fussing. You're being responsible for your feelings and you're expressing it. Mm-hmm. And you are expressing it for a reason. And the reason why you are expressing it is because, well, maybe he didn't know, or maybe she didn't know that when they did it that way, it affected me this way. So let me tell them. Mm-hmm. Okay, now, you can tell them, well, it may, you really hurt my feelings when you did it that way. And one or two things that happen, they can say, well, that's on you, that you took it that way. I didn't, and then again, when they respond that way, it could hurt you again. Like, wow, it doesn't sound like they really understand or supporting me in this matter. Mm-hmm. Or the other way they can respond to it is just say, no, I was just simply saying X, Y, and Z. I wasn't trying to hurt your feelings. I was just expressing it this way. And then they can get vulnerable and say, well, I said it that way because I was truly upset. I was truly upset because of what you said and did. And see, now we're getting somewhere. Mm-hmm. Because when we can't get to that point of really expressing how we felt about things, we'll just continue to throw off. we'll just throw off and continue to hurt each other rather than diving deep and facing why that was hurtful. If we can truly admit to why we say the things that we say and how we say them, and admit it because there was something going on in us internally that the other person didn't know about, then that clears up a lot of things.
Definitely.
But most people, it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to go to that vulnerable space to say, hey, like for an example, say for instance, a couple was together and, they found out that they couldn't have children because, maybe the dad or something, the father, not the dad, he's not a dad yet, but the father or the husband had a low sperm count. And as a result of that triggered his ego as a man. Like, man, I can't father children. Now he's married and he thought he would be able to have children, but he's carrying this burden. And all of a sudden the wife recognizes, right, that something is going on. Our relationship is not the same, right? And she tries everything to bring the relationship back to where it was. And it's not happening because he's not willing to go to that vulnerable place to tell her how he truly is feeling about himself. He's not feeling good about himself because he never expected to be a father, that he couldn't be a father. And I watched it, and I got that concept from a show on Prime Time. I can't remember the name of the movie. I think it is... I want to name the name of the movie, but we'll do some research for the people next time what the name of that movie is. But you can watch it on Prime Time on Amazon. But so he wasn't able to express that. But when he was able to express that, the connection got back together again. The love was there again. They were able to get their relationship back on track. And that's what I'm talking about, being able to go to them vulnerable spaces and talk about it and let your significant other hold the space for you so that you won't have to live in those past experiences, that negativity, that trauma and all those covert beliefs.
Absolutely. You're right on point.
So yeah. So
okay. Well, people, we're coming to the end of our show. Thank you for tuning in. Question that was answered in last week's show. I'm going to read it, and then we'll have Mama FeFe do her questions for this week. So I'm going to read the questions.
Okay.
The question was, what memories or traits no longer benefit you? And the listener answered, the memory I would unpack from my past is the pain and scars that was left in my previous relationship. Going forward, I want to walk in a new light where I don't have to be reminded why I didn't deserve to be loved. Even though I don't deserve any of the mistreatment, I take the blame for some of it because I allowed it to go on when I knew that love shouldn't hurt. I went through the mental and physical abuse where I was at a point where I was high risk of killing myself. Today, I'm in a new relationship, and overall, I've never been this happy. I don't want to carry any of my open wounds into this new relationship because my girl doesn't deserve any of it. So then we have the next answer was to what are the some of the tools, takeaway tools you can use to replace the hurt and pain, etc. The tools I used in my past to help cope, then eventually getting over that pain, was calling a trustworthy friend who's there to listen and not judge you. Also, by reading the word and trusting Yah that this too shall pass. Last but not least, I got my mind off of things by keeping myself preoccupied. Some of the things I've done were exercising at the gym and running on a trail to alleviate some of that stress and tension. So that was his answer. Thank you again for your honesty and actually taking the time to email us with your answer. I appreciate that.
We definitely appreciate that. And I would just add to the first question response is try to find an action to ensure that the woman that you have does not deserve any of the past issues that you went through. You have to put into plan like how you're going to make sure that that doesn't happen and be responsible for that so that you can continue to have a great relationship with the girl you're with now. Thank you for your responses. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And we're going to close out with Mama FeFe's questions of the day. And I'm going to end this. So, Mama FeFe, what's your question of the day?
All right, here are a few questions. If you were stranded on a desert island and all you had with you was a suitcase filled with painful experiences from your past, what would be the quality of your life on that desert island? Do you think you would have what it takes to survive? Would you have the capability to dig deep despite your fears and traumas to live a healthy lifestyle on that desert island? Please email us at unpackingmypast@gmail.com with your reply. We are looking forward to hearing from you.
All right, guys. Thank you again. And thank you for listening. Bye.